Nike sells billions of dollars in shoes, but here's the crazy part. Nike doesn't make most of them. So who does?
Welcome to this explainer. Look at pretty much any city street, whether it's dawn or dusk, and you're going to see people moving, training, and pushing themselves. And more often than not, they're wearing one very specific, very famous logo. Today we're deconstructing how one single company built an absolute empire using a strategy that is actually incredibly counterintuitive. We're going to dive right into the sheer brilliance of the Nike business model.
Let's kick things off with part 1, the billion-dollar illusion.
So walk into any high-end sneaker store, and that swoosh is literally everywhere, right? It represents victory, it represents premium performance. But here is the really fascinating reality we have to talk about. How exactly does a shoe company succeed at this level without actually making shoes? Seriously, the company behind the single biggest footwear empire on the planet doesn't manufacture most of what it sells.
They just aren't in the business of owning massive, heavy machinery. And yet, they've somehow built a brand worth over $150 billion. Instead of pouring all their cash into huge brick-and-mortar factories that just sit there bleeding money when demand slows down, they took a completely different path.
Moving on to part 2, the asset-light blueprint. You see, founder Phil Knight realized super early on that owning physical production was actually a massive liability. The real power? Well, that lay in what happens before and after the shoe is made. Back in 1964, they started out as Blue Ribbon Sports, literally selling imported Japanese shoes out of the trunk of a car. Fast forward to 1971, and the swoosh was officially born. Then they took a massive gamble on rookie Michael Jordan in '84, coined the Just Do It slogan in '88, and completely revolutionized their retail strategy in 2017. The connecting thread through all of this, a laser focus on the brand itself.
The core strategy here is so simple but absolutely brilliant. Owning factories means dealing with crazy complexity, rigid costs, and constant maintenance. Owning the brand, on the other hand, gives you absolute flexibility. By outsourcing their production to Asia, they completely bypass those massive capital costs. That allowed them to focus their entire war chest on design, marketing, and building a genuine relationship with you, the customer.
Which brings us to part 3, selling dreams, not shoes.
So, if they aren't stressing over factory maintenance, what exactly are they doing with their time? Well, they're engineering human emotion. And honestly, inspiration for this sometimes comes from the darkest places imaginable. Let's do it. Believe it or not, those were the final words of a death row inmate named Gary Gilmore right before his execution. Advertising founder Dan Whedon found that raw defiance so compelling that he tweaked it. And in 1988, it became the universally iconic Just Do It.
The financial impact of this emotional marketing pivot was just staggering. That single campaign absolutely skyrocketed their North American market share. Worldwide sales exploded from $877 million to a whopping $9.2 billion over the next decade. That right there is the immediate, undeniable ROI of masterful storytelling.
While most of their competitors were out there advertising lighter materials or, better foam, Nike did the exact opposite. Instead of trying to sell you on a shoe's functional features, they sold motivation. They sold identity and the aspiration to just achieve greatness. The implicit message was almost never, hey, buy this shoe. It was always, imagine who you could become.
This strategic positioning totally shifted them from just selling a commodity to selling an identity. By anchoring their marketing with iconic, legendary athletes like Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, and Serena Williams, they effectively transferred the raw emotions of victory, resilience, and excellence directly into the brand itself. You weren't just buying a piece of leather and rubber anymore, you were buying into a piece of greatness.
All right, part 4, managing the supply chain. Now, of course, no global empire is ever built without some serious friction. Relying entirely on outsourced manufacturing across the globe brought intense, massive public scrutiny. Throughout the 1990s, this asset-light model hit a total wall. The brand faced severe allegations regarding sweatshops, poor working conditions, and child labor. And because they didn't actually own the factories, regulating those independent subcontractors proved to be incredibly difficult.
So, to impartially address these missteps and actually take responsibility, they had to completely overhaul their vendor relationships. They implemented what they called a balanced scorecard to grade their suppliers. Instead of only looking at cost, delivery, and quality like they used to, they began strictly enforcing labor standards, health, and environmental metrics. The factories that were high-performing and compliant, they were rewarded with more business.
This deep strategic analysis totally reshaped their operational footprint.
Today, over 90% of Nike footwear and branded apparel is actually made by factory groups they've partnered with for over 15 years. They proved that long-term, heavily monitored relationships can truly drive better workplace empowerment and stabilize an incredibly massive supply chain.
Let's jump to the modern era in Part 5, the direct-to-consumer shift.
Mastering that supply chain was really only half the battle. Next, they had to master the rapidly changing retail landscape. In 2017, they launched the Consumer Direct Offense. Recognizing the slow, inevitable death of traditional mall-based retail, the company aggressively pivoted. They started cutting out the middlemen, those multi-brand sporting goods stores, so they could own the direct relationship with buyers through their own apps, their own websites, and their own massive flagship stores.
And this trade-off was incredibly deliberate. Under the old wholesale model, they had to share their margins, and they lost visibility on who was actually buying their shoes. With the direct-to-consumer model, they get to keep all the margins, and far more importantly, they own all the customer data. Get this, they even walked away from a pilot program with Amazon. They were willingly sacrificing ultimate distribution reach just to gain absolute control over how their brand was presented.
That level of strategic foresight paid off massively for them. When the 2020 pandemic forced physical retail closures all over the globe, Nike was already prepared for it. Their digital-first integration proved absolutely critical. It accelerated their e-commerce growth by several years in a matter of months, leaving their competitors scrambling just to catch up.
Finally, Part 6, the power of brand.
Ultimately, what this explainer really highlights is the profound difference between merely manufacturing a physical product and carefully engineering a true brand identity. Look, products can be copied, factories can be replicated, but an emotional connection that has been meticulously built over decades, that is an unassailable moat. They've proven that sometimes the absolute best way to dominate a physical industry is to focus entirely on the intangible. So, I want to leave you with this thought. For the next time you're standing in a store or browsing a sneaker app, are you buying a product? Or are you buying a feeling?